Hello, everyone, and welcome to Did I Get Lucky? Discovering the Truth Behind Success. In this 45-minute program today, you'll learn why you feel like you got lucky and don't deserve the success you have, and why it's holding you back. And most importantly, you'll learn strategies to conquer the feeling of, I don't deserve this. I want to thank you for coming today. I appreciate you taking this time out, marking this time off for you and to spend time with me. I hope that you'll take this time to be in a quiet place, to stay focused, turn off your phone ringer and all your notifications for email and social media. Don't check email, just be here. Be in this space, present for the next 45 minutes or so. I'm Susan Baroncini-Moe, and I will be leading this webinar today, as well as the others in the series. I'm an executive coach with over 16 years experience, working primarily with successful women who are executives, entrepreneurs, and other high performers. I have a master's degree in social psychology, and I've spent, and I continue to spend always, a lot of time in training to keep my skill set fresh and my toolbox full. I am the author of the book Business in Blue Jeans: How to Have a Successful Business on Your Own Terms in Your Own Style, available through Amazon and other fine booksellers. I've worked with clients on 4 continents in a very wide range of industries, and just a few fun facts about me. I held the Guinness World Records title for the world's longest uninterrupted live webcast for 2.5 years. I've tried over 100 hobbies in my lifetime. I've played violin for 38 years. I'm on the board of directors for the Junior League of Indianapolis, and I'm a big reader. I've read over 2,500 books on the subjects of personal development, coaching, wellness, personal growth, business, entrepreneurship, leadership, marketing, interpersonal dynamics, networking, wellness, psychology, philosophy, management. The list goes on. Many of my clients have a hard time owning their successes. They have an overriding feeling that they just got lucky, or they were in the right place at the right time. The thoughts are things like, maybe I was just lucky. Maybe I got born into a good family, or I got to go to a good school, or I had the right connections. Maybe I was lucky to have gotten this job or that opportunity. So today we're going to talk about why this feeling of having lucked into your career holds you back from greater levels of success, as you wonder, what do I really have to offer? I just got lucky, and think that you don't really deserve your success. Here's our roadmap for today. We're going to talk about why people think they got lucky instead of earning their success. We'll talk about success itself. We'll talk about self-worth and why you think you don't deserve the success you've earned. We'll also talk about how to improve our sense of self-worth, and that's really where we're going to spend most of our time. Now, from time to time today, I will pause so that you can do some of the work in the workbook. If you're in the live webinar right now, then I've emailed that to you, and it should be in your inbox. If you are watching this on the blog or on YouTube, you will find in the blog, you'll find the workbook linked to in the post. If you're on YouTube, you should find it in the description of this webinar. I encourage you to have your workbooks actually printed out on paper. Shocking. But the goal is you can handwrite your answers. Now, the research indicates that handwriting connects to your brain much more effectively than typing. If you handwrite your answers, you're going to benefit more from them than if you type them. So I do encourage you to print and handwrite. I know, save a tree, but save yourself. So this time around, the subject matter is pretty personal. So unlike the delegation webinar where we talked about delegating and there was plenty of time for discussion, today we're not going to pause for discussion. I think it could be beneficial here, but it wasn't really something that I set out as my intention for this particular webinar. So we're going to skip that part. We'll spend some time in the workbook, but we won't spend time in discussion. Okay, let's dive in. So why do people think they just got lucky when they're successful? What's really going on there? Well, I believe this is a type of imposter syndrome, but it's a very special breed of imposter syndrome. If you saw our webinar on imposter syndrome, which again, available on the blog and YouTube if you want to see it, you know that researchers don't actually know why we develop imposter syndrome. But if you saw that webinar, you know I have my theories. And my theories are that sometimes it's the result of being born into privilege. Sometimes it's also the result of things coming easily to you. Now, when things come easily, it's simple to attribute your success to things other than what you've done. Sometimes when you're really good at planning, things fall into place and you think, man, I got lucky. That was pretty seamless. The other day I was talking to someone about my Guinness World Record. And when people find out about that, when they find out I broke a Guinness World Record, they think that's a pretty big deal. I'm going to be transparent here and tell you I'm proud of having earned that title. I'm proud of holding it for 2.5 years. But sometimes when I think about it, it kind of isn't that big a deal to me. And what I mean by that is when I really think about it, my memories of the event and the day, the time leading up to it. I mean, I planned and executed a full in-person event with 33 speakers online and an online event. We had witnesses, we had, full AV, we had to record the whole thing. It was a big production. But when I think about it, my memories of the event are not that it was super hard for me to do. Okay? It took a lot of hours and it took a lot of effort. But the reality is that I operated in that experience with a singular intent, that I knew exactly what I wanted to do and how I wanted to do it. I am a really good planner. I'm a good project manager, and I know risk management. And because I planned that event exceptionally well, and because I had a singular intent that I went into that project like, okay, what do I need to do to make this a reality? When I actually talked to my husband about the world record event for the first time, I sat down on the bed. I said, babe, I think I'm going to break a world record. Is that cool? He said, sure, that sounds great. And I said, cool. It might cost us a little money at first, but I'm going to get other people to pay for it. Is that cool? Yeah, that's fine. So that was the conversation we had. I never said, I think maybe I might try. No, I said, I think I'm going to break a world record. Is that cool? And you might have similar experiences. When you think, okay, what do I need to do to make this happen? Don't you kind of make things happen? Now, most of my clients, including some of you, are incredibly smart women who are exceptional planners. You're resourceful. You take initiative to make things happen. So I want you to be aware that the things that come easily to you, those things do not come easily to other people. That's why it's so valuable. That's why what you do is so special. And yet, most of you don't know it, not deep down in your gut. And there have been times that I haven't known it. But actually, it was the record that taught it to me, that taught me that I kept thinking, how did that happen? Did I just get lucky there? I actually had that feeling. But the reality is, no, I didn't get luck. I mean, there was probably a little luck involved in the technical side of things that the internet didn't go down. But the reality is, it was not luck. It was amazing planning and singular intent. And so that's an important piece. So as you evaluate your great experiences, the great things that you've done, it is important to go back. So let's talk for a minute about the differences between self-worth and self-esteem. Now, self-esteem, there's a reason we're talking about this. We'll get here. Self-esteem is when you base your worth and your value on external actions, like your job, your hobbies, your volunteerism, what other people think of you. Self-worth is valuing your inherent worth as a person. It's about who you are, not what you do. So self-worth is kind of awesome because you don't have to be anything to be worthy and valuable. With self-esteem, you have to do things to be worthy and valuable. So you can see how those are different. So why do we have trouble with these things? Well, first of all, our society tends to focus on self-esteem and encourages us to find high self-esteem. We tend to measure ourselves against others rather than paying attention to our own intrinsic value. We live in an extremely competitive culture. We all think we have to be special and above average to feel good about ourselves. But if you really think about it, we cannot all be above average because then average moves up. If we're all above average, average now is above average. That's the new average. So comparing yourself to others is always going to be a losing game. There will always be someone richer, smarter, more attractive, better at something, more successful. And even when we hang on to self-esteem and we can be the best for a moment, we can't hold on to it. It's elusive. I spoke earlier about my Guinness World Record. I held that record for 2.5 years, and I'm proud of that. The accomplishment of breaking that record, in spite of how things lined up so I could do it, it is something I'm proud of. Maybe not in spite of, but in part because of. I was very proud of that accomplishment. I would say it absolutely contributed to my self-esteem. But with something like that, there is always the threat of someone trying to break your record. When you've set the bar, someone wants to set it higher. Now, in 2014, I still held my record, and I was contacted by ABC. ABC called my business and left a voicemail. And when I heard that voicemail, I get a lot of junk emails and a lot of junk phone calls. And I'm not going to lie, I got the voicemail and I was like, yeah, ABC, sure. I didn't return the call for about 4 days. And then something happened. I just had a little voice in my head that said, you should maybe think about finding out if that was actually an actual person. All right. So I picked up the phone and I called them back and they were like, oh my gosh, we didn't think you were going to call us back. Why didn't you call us? I said, look, I didn't think it was a real thing. I thought it was a spam call. No, we want you to be on the show. So once I realized it was an actual thing, and this was a Who Wants to Be a Millionaire Guinness World Records special edition episode. So it was only people who had earned Guinness World Records. And I thought that sounds like a great adventure. So my husband and I agreed to do the taping. So if you want to see the video, it's available on my channel on YouTube. If you want to know if I won, I totally won. And then I totally lost. And for a long time, I blamed George Clooney, but I've gotten over it. And now I just blame myself because I actually knew that. Never mind. Anyway, not long before the taping, we actually found out that someone had broken my record. I still got to do the show, but it was a little deflating to find out someone broke my record. My self-esteem around that record, it's kind of deflated. But then I went to the show and I learned a lot. The first thing that happened when we got to the studio is that we met a ton of other record holders. And that had never happened to me before. I broke this record and I felt alone. I had never met anyone else who broke a world record before. We met the fastest pumpkin carving man. We met the fastest Christmas tree chopping girl, a guy who ate a ton of ghost chili peppers, the fastest talking woman. We met Ken Jennings, who was on Jeopardy a lot. And we met the guy who has the largest comic book collection in the world. And they were all really interesting people. And some of them are still friends today. But what really stood out to me was that for some of these people, their entire identities were built around these records. I met a gentleman who, and I'm not going to say what his record was, but it was an oddity to me. I was like, that's an interesting skill. But I don't want to out him. But I will say that he had lost his record as well before the show. And he had actually been to another country where he had been on TV there with a guy who was going to attempt to break his record. And they brought him to that country so he could be on the show and have an opportunity to recapture his record or, sort of battle the guy. And he failed in that country. And so then they brought him to the Millionaire Show, and they brought a Guinness adjudicator to see if he could reclaim his record. This guy came with his wife, and you could tell that his wife based a lot of her self-esteem on being married to a Guinness World Record holder and was very concerned that, all the, fame and, I don't know. I haven't had any fame really as a result of breaking a record. My record's not the same though. It's not visual. It's not something you can go do on a TV show. You're not going to have me on your show for a very long webcast. So some of these people who, a friend of mine has a record for breaking the most toilet seats over his head. I guess that's something you can do on TV. But this guy, his wife based a lot of her self-esteem on being married to a record holder. And this guy was really broken down because he had based his self-esteem on that as well. And not being able to recapture that record really hurt him. Now, you might be thinking, how does this apply to me? I'm an executive. What does this have to do with me? Look, my point is, what I learned that day and what I want you to hear is that your accomplishments, they'll come and go. You will do great things. Many of you do great things regularly. But after you do something great, if you're basing your value on those external accomplishments, on self-esteem, it won't be long before you have to hunt for the next thing. You'll keep chasing accomplishments, trying to recapture that glory and the self-esteem. So the thing is, even when we hang on to self-esteem and can be the best for a moment, it's only for a moment. We can't hang on to it for a long time because the glory fades and we have to start chasing it again. Okay, I'd like you to take a moment to work in your workbooks. Do you base your value in self-esteem and external accomplishments, or do you tend to base your value in self-worth and in your inherent value as a person? I'm going to mute my mic for 1 minute. It should give you enough time to get started on some of these questions. You will not get them all done in today's webinar, but I do want you to get a good enough start on them that you feel compelled to come back and finish them later today. So I'm going to put a minute on the clock and mute my mic. Okay, welcome back. I hope you got some work done. All right. I'm going to guess here. It's not a wild guess. It's a guess based on over 16 years experience working with clients. I'm going to guess that when you answered the question around how you base your value, that you said you look to your accomplishments. So we're going to talk about how one goes about improving self-worth, which is based on internal inherent value. Why? Well, the reason is that the research shows that basing your value on external factors is actually harmful to mental health. When you base your value on external factors, you have a tendency toward more stress, anger, relationship conflicts, and negative coping mechanisms like drugs and alcohol use and abuse and eating disorders. So those who base their value on internal sources are less likely to develop negative coping mechanisms, and they're more likely to be successful. So how do you do it? There are 3 steps, but within the steps, there are kind of sub-steps. So we're going to go through each one together. Okay, step 1 is stop comparing yourselves to others. You want to do some deep diving to find out why you might engage in a lot of self-comparison. We tend to do it as a society anyway, right? Like it's trained, but there are a lot of reasons why we do it, and it's worth exploring. Sometimes a coach or therapist can be very instrumental in helping you to identify the why of it for you. I personally do a lot of competitive self-comparison because as children, my parents made a big deal. This is very common. My parents made a very big deal out of giving us everything the same. Everything had to be equal. But sometimes, because my sister was older, she got to do things I wasn't really ready for. There was a lot of comparison to her and assessing, is this equal? And wondering why things were or weren't equal. Now, I think parents try very hard to do the best they can. Mine certainly did. And this being the same thing is considered very common and very fair, but it does tend to engender comparisons. And it's important to find out why you engage. That's why I do it. I don't know if that's why you do it, but it's important to find out why you engage in self-comparison because it is relevant to stopping the behavior. Now, to be clear, when we talk about comparison, we're talking about a very specific kind of comparison. We're talking about comparing and finding yourself lacking or wanting versus comparing and seeing someone in someone that you admire and want to emulate. So these are different things. As you do the deep diving, look for a time when you didn't compare yourself to others. Can you remember a time? Do you remember ever not comparing yourself to others? And as you think about this, consider keeping a comparison journal. I've actually created some space in your workbook for this. For a couple of days, you track how often you compare yourself and feel envy or lack. And you see what kinds of things you compare and how frequently, and then you can assess if it's something that's a problem that needs to be addressed. Pretty simple. You also want to watch out for social media and media in general. One of the things that we know about Facebook is that it's a place where we compare ourselves a lot, and there's been a lot of psychological research done here. We look at our friends and colleagues' images and videos and updates, and we think, God, their lives are so much better than mine. If you think about that, if you go back and think about how you manage your Facebook, though, do you post everything about your life, or do you selectively post? We know from the research that people selectively post. And more than that, we know people edit and crop photos. There's this really interesting article about how people creatively crop their images to make their lives seem better, more appealing, more exciting, or glamorous. And I actually snagged a couple of the images from this article because I thought it was so interesting. So here are a couple of those images. Oh, look, I live in a beautiful, glamorous apartment with a clean bed and these odd things on like, why you would have these things on your bed, I don't know. But if you look at the Instagram image, and it's called My Workspace, and then you look at the bigger picture, it's not a good workspace. And here, if you look at this one, this looks as if you look at the image she actually posted on Instagram, it looks as if she somehow found this magical, isolated beach where there were no people. But when you look at the whole thing, you realize there were lots of people, and, it's not that glamorous. So that's the first thing. You want to watch out for Facebook and other social media platforms because you're comparing the entirety of your life to the best parts, the highlights of everyone else's, as if they're apples to apples comparisons, and they're not. And it's also important, and I think we are aware of this, it's important to be aware that the people we see in media aren't realistic or even real, right? The airbrushing and perfection that we see isn't real. Now, I think we know this logically, but we still hold ourselves to that perfect standard. So we have to begin to identify not real, before we compare ourselves to it. If you're careless with your mindset, it's easy to let your mind wander into comparing yourself. As women, we're particularly prone to comparisons. And as competitive women, as most successful women are, we're even more likely to find ourselves comparing. This is a daily practice. It's something you must pay close attention to. My husband and I have a yoga instructor who comes to our house every week and gives us a yoga lesson. The other day, I found myself comparing my form to my husband's form and asking myself, is the instructor correcting me as much as she's correcting him? I caught that one pretty quick. As soon as I noticed it, I thought, why am I doing this? You have to become a master of mindfulness and staying in the present moment and being aware of what you are doing. I've been practicing this for a long time, and obviously I still do stuff like this. So it's important to stay on top of your brain, or it can easily wander into this territory, and it will. There are great mindfulness exercises like spending a day doing things with your non-dominant hand. So I'm left-handed, and when I spend a day trying to do stuff with my right hand that I normally use my left hand for, like eating or writing, it was so hard, but it really kept me in that moment. There's another one that is, and there are wonderful books about with mindfulness exercises. Another one is becoming very present in mundane activities. So there was one day that I was experimenting with mindfulness, and the task was to focus on buttering your toast. I don't even eat toast, but I ate toast that day. And the idea was to focus all of your attention on that one activity. No music, no conversation while you're doing it, nothing but that one thing. It's very interesting. So it's an important task to try to become more mindful and be in the present. When you focus inward and look for what you're grateful for and what you can appreciate, then you can compare yourself and what you have or do far less frequently. This works very nicely with getting in the present. As you become more grateful, you also become more present. And I recommend writing down 3 things that you're grateful for every single day. And again, here is a place where handwriting is more effective than typing. When I first started doing this gratitude practice, I like to automate things. I actually have a blog post in my blog about how I automate gratitude. And it's funny because I need to go back and update that post now, note to self, because when I first started doing my gratitude practice, I set up a system. So I'm a big fan of systems. And so I set up the system where every day I got an automatic email reminding me it's time for your moment. It's time for your gratitude exercise. So you have to go to this link, which was a form that I would fill out on my own little form. And it would be, what are the 3 things you're most grateful for? And I would type in 3 things. And that form sent that data to a spreadsheet. And I, over the course of a year, created an enormous spreadsheet of things I was grateful for. Well, here's why that didn't work. It didn't work because I would type my entries, and typing doesn't connect to the brain in the same way that handwriting does. So I would type my entries and then close my window, and I would promptly forget the 3 things I was grateful for. I would forget that spirit of gratitude. I didn't connect with it emotionally. Now, the second year, after I evaluated this practice and realized, it made me a little more gratitude filled, a little more grateful, but it didn't really change my life. So I thought, well, what might have gone wrong with that? Because I do believe that that is something that can help you feel better about your world, about your life. And I analyzed it and realized that it could have been the typing. And it was. I bought a beautiful journal that I would love writing in every day. And I began to handwrite my 3 things every day. I didn't have an automated email. I didn't have a form. Just every day, first thing I did before I even got out of bed practically, I would sit on my bedside, right next to my bed, and I would handwrite the 3 things I was most grateful for. And that connected with me in a completely different way. So it's funny, these handwriting things are completely different. And I think there's a space in your workbook for a gratitude journal, just for the start of it. But I recommend that you get a really beautiful journal that you're going to like writing in. You also want to become more aware of your uniqueness, which ultimately makes it much harder for you to compare yourself to others. So make a list of what sets you apart and makes you different from other people, because it makes it harder for you to compare yourself. There are also some really solid NLP techniques that can help you to minimize comparisons, basically strategies that can help you once you identify common thoughts and comparisons that you're prone to. These are very individualized, as is most of NLP. They're very hard to describe because they are so unique to the individual. What I would choose for you would depend on what you're doing. But suffice to say, NLP can be quite effective and helpful. If you're interested, we can talk about that on a one-on-one basis. Okay, I'd like you to take some time now to work in your workbooks. Just get a start in your gratitude journal by handwriting 3 things you're grateful for today, and also begin to answer what makes you different and unique and sets you apart from other people. I'm going to mute my mic for a moment, and then I'll come back. Okay, welcome back. Now we've completed step 1. Step 2 is stop evaluating every move you make. Evaluating everything you do is when you judge it. You think, well, I didn't do that very well, or I did that almost perfectly. You don't actually have to do that. You don't have to judge everything you do. You actually can just let things be. It's not that all self-evaluation is problematic, but only the evaluation we do when we make a mistake, and instead of seeing the mistake as a problem, we see ourselves as bad in general. So instead, you want to feel good about who you are. You have self-worth, the internal self-worth. But even if you make a mistake, you're not going to generalize it. So when you have self-worth, because that's an internal thing, it's not impacted by mistakes, which ultimately will keep you from overgeneralizing from one mistake into a flaw of your entire character, your entire being. And this is really important because as you process, while sometimes in some people, I've seen clients who use this to fuel their moves toward success. People who, use this idea that if I make a mistake, I've got to work much harder, and they become very successful because of that drive toward, not making any mistakes and being perfect. But the problem is that fall can be pretty big. So you do want to start being kinder to yourself. There are ways to continue to grow and improve and achieve greater heights of success without being destructive. I like to think of the word COAL. It's a good acronym to remember. It's being curious. What happened here with this mistake, and where did I go wrong? Because usually I do things right? Being curious about things, being open to, I'm always a work in progress. I just keep learning. Being accepting. I accept that I'm imperfect. And being loving to yourself and to others. I think there are 3 steps to being kinder to yourself. One is to acknowledge and notice your suffering, your struggling. Being kind and caring in response to your suffering. And remembering that imperfection is part of your human experience, and it's something we all share as a collective. No one is perfect. You want to also look at how much you've grown and evolved. In fact, here's another journaling opportunity. Today's webinar is all about journaling. All the different things that you can journal and track. You can write a weekly or a monthly journal recording how much you've grown and how much you continue to become a new and improved version of yourself. There's a space in your workbook for that. You also want to think about how much you judge others. If you can minimize judging others and be kinder to others as well, you will naturally be kinder to yourself and judge yourself less. This is a really interesting parallel. Over the years, every client I've ever had who is extremely hard on herself, judgmental about her mistakes, is also hard on others and judgmental of others. So you want to seek to understand people and judge them less, and look at their histories and their life experiences. And also remember, if someone makes a mistake, that doesn't mean they're bad or stupid. It means they made a mistake. It has nothing to do with their worth as a human being. So consider how much you judge and seek to judge less. All right, we're going to take another minute in your workbook. I want you to take some time out and ask yourself, how much have you grown this week? And how much do you judge others? And is that something that you could work on? I'm going to mute my mic for a minute, and then I'll get back and we'll move on to step 3. Okay, are you ready for step 3? Step 3 is to challenge your critical inner voice. We all have a critical inner voice that acts like a cruel coach inside our heads that tells us we're worthless or undeserving of happiness. Any other messages that sound like that? This coach is shaped from painful childhood experiences and critical attitudes that we were exposed to early in life, as well as feelings that our parents had about themselves. While these attitudes can be hurtful, over time, they become ingrained in us. So as adults, we may fail to see them as an enemy and instead accepting their destructive point of view as our own. So for example, and I think this is really important. When I was a little girl, I was very, very loving. very loving little girl. Just that's something my mom always told me. You were the most loving child. And it's funny, when I met my husband, I recognized that level of loving in another human being. Like he is the kind of loving that my mom described me as. And so when I met him, I actually was, life had turned me into not so loving. Not exactly, right? But when I was a little girl, I think I was meant to be loving. I think I was born to be loving, but I also come from a dysfunctional family, and many things happened over the years. And, people do their best, but over time, you sort of hear these messages and you develop these things, and you develop a hardness, you react to it. And so one of the things I'm most grateful to my husband for is that he helped me, and he helped me because of how loving he is, to be more loving, to see that in action, and to model it and emulate it, and be reminded of who I was meant to be. And so I think that for a long time, I didn't realize that critical inner voice, that angry coach inside my head, was actually not who I'm meant to be. And thank goodness for my husband, thank goodness for my coaches. And those things helped me to really connect with who I was meant to be. We hear a variety of voices in our experience, and over time, we assimilate those voices and the voice begins to sound like our own. So we think that's us, but it isn't. So there are 4 steps to challenging your inner voice. One is to identify the voice. Whose voice is this? So you want to know what it's telling you and what the messages are, and also acknowledge that this thought process is separate from your true point of view. You want to acknowledge that it is not a reflection of reality. It is a viewpoint that you assimilated based on destructive early life experiences and attitudes that were directed toward you, that you ultimately internalized and made into your perspective. So identify whose voice this is. It might be one person, it might be multiple people, but it's important to understand whose voice that is, and then to separate from it. So one way that you can differentiate and separate from your inner critic is to write the thoughts down in the second person, the you statements. So you might think things like, I can't get anything right. And you should write those as, you can't get anything right. And this is going to start to show you that these thoughts are alien thoughts and they are not true statements. So you want to start to notice that this internal enemy, and that's what it is, can be very hostile, very hostile. Then you want to respond to your inner critic. Start writing down a more realistic and compassionate evaluation of yourself. So write these responses in the first person as I statements. So for example, if you have a statement like, you're such an idiot, well, you can write, well, I might struggle at times, but I'm smart and I'm competent in many ways. Or if you know that thought, you're such an idiot, if that thought came as a result of something that is not your area of expertise, or in response to a mistake. This is not my area of expertise. That's okay. I get a lot of things right. Or, I make mistakes. I'm not perfect. This exercise, the specific step here, it's not designed to build you up or boost your ego. It's designed to show you a kinder and more honest and authentic attitude toward yourself. And then the 4th step, you don't want to act on anything your inner critic tells you. So if your inner critic gives you directives, you don't want to act on those. You want to take actions that represent your point of view, your authentic, who you want to be, and what you aim to achieve. Your critical inner voice at this point may begin to get louder. It may tell you, stay in line, don't take chances. But by identifying, differentiating from, and responding to and acting against this destructive thought process, you're going to go stronger. And over time, your inner critic is going to grow weaker. So you want to continue to challenge this critical inner voice. Okay, I would like you to take a moment and begin to assess and address your inner critic. There are several questions in your workbook. You're not gonna get this finished today, but try to get started, and then you may want to finish after the webinar or with a coach. So I'm gonna put my mic on mute for 1 minute and give you some time to get started. Okay. Another great way to improve feelings of self-worth is to look for ways to add meaning to your life by taking part in activities that are important to you and or give back to the world and take your attention, your focus off of you. Generosity is really, really good for you. A study at the University of Michigan showed that generosity improves mental and physical health and promotes longevity. It reduces stress and it enhances your sense of purpose. What's important about generosity isn't measured in dollar figures or physical gain. It's about the sensitivity we show to another person. The more directly we see our personal efforts impact someone, the more we gain from the experience of giving. As a side note here, it's important as executives and as pretty high-level women to note that it is the direct experience that is most impactful. So, for example, I am on the board of directors for the Junior League of Indianapolis. Now, when I joined the Junior League as a member, I had a wonderful experience because I rolled up my sleeves. Every time I was doing the work, I was in a space with the people I was doing good for, people I was trying to help. And I got to see their gratitude. I got to see their smiles. I saw how they experienced me. It helped me to very directly experience the work and the results of the work. And it was, as I call it, a very soul-feeding experience. Now, what happens typically is that as executives and high-level individuals, our default is leadership. And certainly that's my default as well. In fact, my very next move was to apply for the board of directors of the Junior League of Indianapolis. And of course, that's what I do now. And what I've discovered in these last 2 years is that being on the board of an organization that does good is great. You have an idea of the good that you do. You have an idea of the impact, and maybe once in a while you go down and you see, what people are doing and what the results are. But the great thing about rolling up your sleeves and getting in the trenches is you have a direct experience. And when you're at the level of the board, when you're at the level of this high level, you lose that direct soul-feeding experience. Even if you're fundraising, even if you're, working for the good of the cause, you lose that direct input. And so if you are struggling with the differentiation between self-esteem and self-worth, and you want to boost your self-worth, I encourage you to do some of that roll up your sleeves, get your hands dirty, direct interface work where you're actually in the trenches. It's a great deal more soul feeding, and you also get to experience that sensitivity to others, the empathy, and you get to see the impact of your personal efforts on another human being. Another great thing about this kind of work is that it shifts the focus off of ourselves, simultaneously distracting from our inner critical voice and creating evidence against us. It's very hard for that voice to prove that we're worthless when we're watching someone else benefit from our actions, right? Investing energy in transcendent goals and activities that extend beyond oneself and one's self-interest, like contributing to a humanitarian cause or trying in some way to improve the lot of future generations, those things help build self-worth. Generosity is a natural confidence builder, and it's a very powerful repellent of self-hatred. So these are really important things to factor in. And the research actually shows that volunteering has a very positive effect on how people feel about themselves, because you tend to develop a sense of yourself as a worthwhile person in the world. Another research study showed that 27 people, they traced 2,700 people over 10 years. And it showed that men who did regular volunteer work had death rates 2.5 times lower than men who didn't. I want you to think about the activities and the interests that feel meaningful to you personally, and pursue those activities that are really soul-feeding. It will make a huge difference. Okay, I'd like you to take another moment, answer the questions about how you can become more generous. Are there organizations you might like to volunteer with to take your focus off of yourself and build self-worth? I'll mute my mic for a moment and then we'll come back. Okay, welcome back. Okay, another thing I wanted to mention on self-worth is that acting on principles in ways that you respect, it's another quality to foster as you develop higher levels of self-worth. When our actions don't match our words, when we're out of integrity and alignment, we're more vulnerable to attacks from our critical inner voice, and we're less likely to respect ourselves. I try to live by the 4 agreements, for example, by Don Miguel Ruiz. Those agreements are: 1, be impeccable with your word. 2, don't take anything personally. 3, don't make assumptions. And 4, always do your best. I actually add 2 more, which come from my Reiki training. And those are: 1, just for today, I will be grateful. And 2, just for today, I will treat all living things with kindness. These are the things that resonate with me. They're just examples for you to feed from. There may be others that resonate more with you, but it's important to find some principles, or even just write down the principles that you find useful and pay attention to how you live according to them. Now, of course, we have some space in your workbooks, so I'm going to give you just a few seconds here because we need to wrap up. So a few seconds here to note your own principles, as well as any other things that you might like to add, and think about how you might live even more by your principles and how you could stay even truer to them. Okay. So the key takeaways that I want you to remember from today are that feeling like you just got lucky is a special kind of imposter syndrome. It's a kind that I think comes from being really smart and things coming easily to you, or let's be honest, growing up in privilege. When things come easily, it's easy to believe you're just lucky, but in fact, you might just be acting with singular intent toward a specific goal, and you might be highly capable, highly intelligent, and highly resourceful. Remember to think about the differences between self-esteem, which is based on external actions, and self-worth, based on your inherent value as a person. To improve self-worth, stop comparing yourself to others. Stop evaluating every single move that you make. Challenge your critical inner voice and look for more meaning in your life. Okay, folks, that's it for today. I hope you found this webinar helpful. Those of you who are on the webinar who'd enjoy doing a session with me to apply what we've talked about today specifically to your life, if you want to explore, just email me at the address on the screen and we'll schedule a time for a conversation. If you've missed any of the webinars in this series that you wanted to attend, do be sure to check out the blog or our YouTube channel for the recordings. Also, please remember that this webinar series concludes tomorrow with "What did I get myself into?" Easing transitions and settling into a new path. I hope you'll join me tomorrow, and do be sure to keep your eyes open because I'll likely be doing another similar series in the spring. Thank you again so much for taking this time today. I'll see you next time.